Professor Kenneth Wilbur is is a professor right now in Duke School of Business. I think he does a lot of research in interaction between advertising, technology, and media. So I'm hoping this talk will be really relevant to us since we have Google TV, we have a TV advertising team, and also we have the search. So hopefully you guys will be benefit for this talk.
Thanks, Ching. It's always an honor to be invited anywhere, but to be invited back is a real treat. So exciting place. Everybody's working across disciplinary boundaries. My background's in econometrics. I work in marketing. I have papers with CS folks and a few other fields also. So it's always a treat to come over here and talk to you guys. Early in my career, I started teaching advertising, and I learned about this technology that was invented in the 1970s. It imperceptibly sped up radio advertisements. And so when this technology came out, there were questions about whether this was good for the effectiveness of those advertisements. And they found that the faster they played the speech, the more people liked it, and the better they retained the information. So my approach has, ever since I read that, my approach to talks has always been to speak quickly. And I trust that you will inform me if I flub my words or if you have any questions. So I'm going to spend probably about 45 minutes on the main paper here and reserve the last 15 minutes for something which is a little bit less developed, but I think might lead to some very interesting conversations and maybe give you a different perspective. This one I think is going to, I wouldn't have written the paper if the answer to that question wasn't something that looks like yes. But the second one I think is perhaps a little bit more counterintuitive. So the rate at which people are multitasking has sort of risen toward the heavens in the last 10 years. So a study done by Nielsen for Yahoo last year said about 38% of Americans are multitasking with TV and internet every single day. Some academic evidence based on self-reported media usage from a diary sample from 01 to 04. Self-reported multitasking rose 72% in the span of 3 years, which is kind of jaw-dropping. So this is important for marketing, but there hasn't been a lot of work in marketing on why that is. You guys probably have better data than this, but this is something that motivated us to study this topic. We know in marketing so the question was whether this has continued to go up a lot. I'm going to take for granted that it has. You probably have much better data on that than I do. I'm just going to use that fact as motivation for studying this topic. We know from decades of research in marketing that advertising influences consumer search. So just cherry picking a couple of examples from people who work with me at Duke. Newman and Stalin found that if I've seen an ad, then the brand that was advertised, I can recall it much more easily. So if I'm choosing a keyword to search in a search engine, I might choose the brand rather than a category related keyword. If I have a little bit of prior information, then I tend to search more than if I have no prior information or a lot of prior information. And so if TV advertising provides some information, that might influence how much I search at a search engine. And advertising also influences how satisfied I am with the results of my search and with the product consumption choices that I make. And so that you could make an argument that could map onto the likelihood I click a result, which might be an indicator of how satisfied I am with the search that I performed. So we're going to estimate a descriptive econometric model, trying to answer the question of whether television advertising is correlated with tendency to search, choice of branded versus generic keywords, and probability of click. I'm going to try to be very careful in my statements and make it clear that this is purely descriptive work. We're measuring correlations and associations. I'm going to show you what assumption you would need to make to interpret these results as causal. I think a reasonable person could make that interpretation, but we're going to stay away from that ourselves. Why these matters? For practice, it's really important in ways that you guys might not like. So if you think that everything on the search engine comes from the search engine and from consumer actions taken at the search engine, then you might misattribute some of the effects that are going on. So if television advertising influences consumer search behavior, then if you don't take that into account when you plan your TV and search campaigns, as marketers typically do not, my best guess is in most categories, that's going to lead you to spend too much on search and too little on television, because you will over-attribute your sales to search and under-attribute your sales to television. But then again, it's only a matter of time before you are selling all the television ads too. So, and it matters for a whole host of other reasons in practice: what keywords you buy, what copy you put in the ads, when you are airing your TV ads, how you target your audience, what effective frequency curve you're using to select programs on TV. Just a whole host of reasons this is important. To the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been studied in a serious way by academics. There is some practitioner literature. Most of that is either based on self-reports or it's regressing quantity of branded searches on timing of TV advertisements, which doesn't allow you to disentangle the incidence of search in the product category versus the choice of the keyword, which is what we're going to try to tease apart here. For academic research, which is what I'm paid to publish, this is really important because the literature on search advertising has absolutely exploded in the last 5 years. And as far as I'm aware, with one exception, every single study assumes that the outcomes at the search engine are determined by elements either that are intrinsic to the consumer or determined within the search engine market. And we're suggesting there's another way for advertisers to compete, which is through other media. I want to be really clear up front that the results I'm going to show you, I do not think they are likely to hold in every product category, and they very well might not hold for different populations of users. This talk is going to be focused a little more around methodology. So I think that we're nailing the results in the setting that we study, but I would expect very different results in other settings. So we're going to be looking at the financial services product category. We're going to be, I'll tell you more about the search data in a minute. There's a couple of reasons why we're focusing on financial services. First of all, it advertised on television a lot. It was the 7th most advertised product category on TV. And we need the TV advertising because we can observe at the minute and second when those ads appeared and how much was spent on them. And that temporal disaggregation gives us a lot of power to identify the effects. Secondly, the brands in this category have relatively unique names. So Charles Schwab, E-Trade, Ameritrade, even words like Fidelity are not often used in other contexts. If I had studied something like computers, then it would be tough to separate the searches for Apple from the searches for the fruit, right? So this brand name overlap with common words and names problem is surprisingly frequent when you look across product categories. Third, this category needs to be something that people actually search for. So if I was doing this on cola, chances are people don't search that much for cola because it's really cheap to buy a cola, try it out, and get your information about the products that way. So this is a high involvement category where people don't purchase very frequently, suggesting that they probably spend a lot of cognitive resources to search for the product that they choose. Fourth, simultaneity is going to be really important in this study because at one point I thought about doing movies. So movies fit these other criteria pretty well. The problem is that TV advertising for movies peaks around the date of their release, as does search activity for movies. And so is the TV advertising causing the search, or is the search causing it would be really hard to tease those apart. In financial services, it's not quite so suspect in terms of is the TV advertising being caused by the search activity. I'll go into that in a little more depth in a minute. Finally, we've got some time varying data which will allow us to isolate the effects of TV advertising from other factors that might be causing search. And we're going to use the stock market index, which is widely reported in media, as an instrument to tease out these effects. So the online search data, we're not we're not advertising the source of these data, but you can probably figure it out. So what we've got is about 20 million queries for a randomly selected subsample of several 100,000 users of a top 10 general interest search engine. It's not Google, Yahoo, or Bing. It covers 3 months in 2006. For each query, we see an anonymous ID, the term that was searched, the date and time of the search. If a result was clicked, then we know the position of the result, and we know the URL that was clicked. I should mention we've been very careful to preserve the anonymity of the user data by analyzing these data in the aggregate in order to comply with our institutional research policies. So what we wanted to do was identify a bunch of branded keywords and a bunch of product category-related generic keywords. And we didn't think that we had a complete list of those when we started the project. So we developed an algorithm to do that. You guys probably have a better one. I don't think it's been published anywhere, but if that's incorrect, I'd love to know about it. Just to sum it up, and the details are in the paper, what we do is we look at keywords that lead primarily to clicks on one brand's website, and we're going to call those keywords that are related to that brand. Keywords that lead to clicks on any brand's website, we're going to call generic, and keywords that often lead to clicks outside the category, we're going to call unrelated. So a couple of examples, things we didn't expect to find, but we did find and have high face validity. Some branded keywords include some very common misspellings of the brand names Charles Schwab and Fidelity. I no longer know how to spell Charles Schwab because I've looked at the misspellings so many times. Those are some brand keywords we didn't expect to see. Generic keywords all look pretty reasonable. A couple there I didn't expect. UGMA turns out to be a particular type of intergenerational wealth transfer. It's a trust fund. It's a tax shelter basically. So things that I didn't expect to see, but after they came out, it made a lot of sense. And then words that were often appearing in queries with these other words, but were not particularly related to financial services that we eliminated, like calculator and government and education and so forth. If there's a particular word that led to clicks on Fidelity.com in a high percentage of queries where clicks occurred, I'm going to assign that word to Fidelity. If that word led to 8 different brand websites on a high percentage of queries where any result was clicked, I'm going to call it generic. And if that word led to financial services brand websites at a relatively low rate on all the result clicks for the queries that included that word, I'm going to call it unrelated. So it worked a lot better than we expected it to. We think that this could be useful in a lot of different settings, like if you're trying to identify particular keywords within, say, a Twitter database, or my favorite application if I was in a law firm doing discovery on a giant lawsuit where I'd been delivered 20 gigabytes of emails and I had to find which of those 10 emails were the smoking gun. You could do something similar to this. The TV advertising data is fantastic. If you've never worked with Kantar, they're great. For every brand in the product category, we're going to see the minute and second at which their advertising appeared, an estimated cost of the advertisement. And then we did a lot of analysis of the advertising content. And the 2 variables we settled on using were calling web emphasis and phone emphasis. What that means is that they either said the name of the website during the commercial or they said the phone number during the commercial. They both correlate pretty highly with other measures we thought of to measure the same thing, and they were very easy to objectively quantify. Because our purpose here is descriptive, we're going to define 4 user segments, and all of our parameters are going to vary within each of those segments. Because we don't have demographics, we can only segment based on user graphics. So if you searched more non-financial services queries than the median consumer, I'm going to call you a frequent searcher. And if you searched anything within the past hour, I'm going to call you a recent searcher. Of course, we only have data for the one search engine, so there is some risk of misclassification of users here. But overall, I think it works pretty well. So to explain each of these behaviors, we're going to have brand fixed effects. We're going to control for all of the temporal variation that we can in terms of week of the sample, hour within the weekday and hour within the weekend. Age of the brand, which correlates highly with total assets under management, as well as recent asset growth under management. And we'll use the changes, the daily changes in the stock index and hourly changes within business hours, since those are widely reported in the media. This is mid-2006. 7% of advertising expenditures met our definition of web emphasis, which means they said the name of the website in the ad. And 16% of those expenditures said the telephone number within the ad. So the brands were emphasizing telephone contact much more than they were emphasizing web contact. And the same pattern shows up in a variety of alternate definitions of web emphasis and phone emphasis. We're seeing people search more on weekdays, which in this category makes sense. Most of these people are probably professionals. They probably do more searching in the office than they do at home. But we're seeing much more advertising on weekends. And I'm going to come back to these in just a minute. So if I graph the advertising expenditures and the total category searches by date within the 3-month sample, I've got the advertising expenditures deflated by a factor of 1,000 in the solid line, total category searches in the dashed line. It's hard to see any correlation there. In fact, it's a slightly negative correlation because the ad expenditures spike on the weekends and the category searches drop on the weekend days. Yeah, so we experiment with a lot of different definitions of click-through rate, and the one we settled on was whether you clicked. So if you searched the brand name at least once within an hour, then we're going to say that you searched the brand. And if you clicked at least one brand-related website, then we're going to call that a click-through rate. So the search engine that provided the data did not display many paid links. When they did, they were lightly shaded and otherwise similar in appearance to the organic links. They typically displayed either 0, 1, or 2 paid links. On the branded searches, branded keyword searches, which is what we're focusing on, those paid links were almost always the same as the top organic links. And so we don't have information on clicks on ads, but in this context, we're not missing a lot. We also tried to get website traffic data. Alexa will not sell that to you if the brand has paid them to withhold it, which was the case. We also tried, we tried to supplement the data in a few other ways, did the best we could. So if we look at the same pattern across hours within weekdays and hours within weekends, we again see close to a lack of correlation in the two variables. And so these data suggest to me that the brands were not planning their TV spending based on the expected search habits of consumers. So if you make that assumption, which is only an assumption, then you can interpret the rest of the results as causal. I don't have hard evidence of it either way, so I'll try to stay away from any causality claims. Although I did present this at Wharton, and there was a guy who worked at Fidelity at the time this data were produced, and I asked him, did you plan your TV expenditures based on user search behavior? And he said, absolutely not. But again, that's only one data point. So okay, so we've got 3 models, we've got 4 segments. We're going to relate all of these behaviors to each other using correlations in the error structure. And I'm going to go kind of quick. Just tell me if you have any questions about anything. For advertising, we're using an exponential smoothing assumption, where basically it's the second equation there. The advertising stock at any in any hour of any day in the sample is going to be just a smooth function of recent advertising expenditures. So this is for searching in the category. What we're controlling for here is gamma 1 is a segment-specific tendency to search any word in this category. We're going to let beta 1, which is the coefficient on advertising, we're going to let that vary according to weekday, hour, and week of the sample. We've got the stock index in there. The XT terms allow the search incidence to vary with time effects, and we've got an error shock at the end, which I usually call Xi, but some people call Kasai, and some people call Kasi, and I'm going to say Xi, which I'll show you how that plays in later. So on the keyword choice, conditional on having searched in the category, what type of word do you choose? We're going to lump all of the branded keywords within a brand indexed by K into one option, because what we saw in the data is that if you searched a keyword related to a particular brand, you almost never searched a keyword related to any other brand within the same hour. And if you searched a brand-related keyword, you almost never went back to a generic keyword within the same hour. So we've got a similar modeling structure predicting the tendency to search the keyword. Again, the baselines are brand-specific in this model. And then the advertising responsiveness parameter also depends on characteristics of the ad, such as whether emphasized web contact, phone contact, and the age of the brand. Finally, conditional on having searched any brand-related keyword, if you click at least one result, then we're going to model that with a binary logit with similar predictors. In terms of the error correlations, those Kasais, what did I say? Xis. The Xis, we're going to allow them to be correlated across models, across segments, across time, and we are going to choose parameters to maximize the simulated log likelihood of all of the data at once. And I'll be happy to go into details later if you want me to. They're kind of boring. They're pretty straightforward. The only thing that we really learned from a strictly modeling point of view that we didn't know going in was we didn't appreciate the importance of waiting for, how do I say it? So in, say at 4 o'clock, 1,000 category searches occurred, and at 5 o'clock, 800 category searches occurred, then we needed to weight the amount of information in the keyword choice model within each time period according to the number of queries that occurred at each time period. So in retrospect, it's pretty obvious, but going in, we hadn't expected that. It's so this is the keyword choice. So basically, what we've got is a multinomial distribution where C in the bottom equation, C is the number of category searches that occurred. C1 is the number of category searches that occurred, and C2 is the number of searches for brand K. So it's closer to importance sampling than a normalization. Okay, so how does the model perform? Fairly well, R-square around 0.7. We do a holdout sample, and it's even a non-random split, so we estimate the model based on March and April. We predict for May, and we see how well we do. The errors in May are less than 5%, or typically about 5 to 6% higher than the errors in March and April, so that's a pretty good performance. What do we find? Search behavior. We don't find any significant correlation between TV advertising and the tendency to search in the category. This is why I threw those caveats in at the beginning of the talk. If this was a new product category, or if there were a bunch of new brands in it, or if it was still evolving, I would expect to find a different pattern of results with regard to search behavior. In this category, I think it makes sense. Basically, what this says is that if I see a TV advertisement, I am not more likely to search any financial services brand. That search for financial services is driven more by maybe lifestyle or demographic or employment or financial factors, not by TV advertising. You might imagine something different in another setting. Yes, we have a very similar result. Well, we have some similar results that that people are searching based on how the market is doing recently. Yeah. We are finding that TV advertising correlates with choice of a branded keyword. So if you were to take the causal interpretation, then if I see a TV ad, I'm less likely to search a generic keyword and more likely to search a branded keyword. That has tremendous implications for the marketer regarding the breadth of competitive information available to the consumer, and also regarding the likely costs of paid clicks on the search results that the marketer has to pay. Those effects are biggest for consumers who search often and consumers who have not searched recently. So if you take those together, it suggests that the dominant mechanism might be that if I am a frequent searcher and I see a TV ad, I haven't searched recently, but I will start a search rather than, I'm already online, I hear a TV ad in the background, and that influences my search behavior. So it suggests TV advertising more likely to start me multitasking rather than affect me while I am multitasking. The effects are biggest during business hours and for younger brands. We measure the effects in terms of elasticities, and we're finding that they're pretty comparable to other studies' measurements of short-run elasticities of TV advertising on sales. So that's for younger brands. So somewhere around 0.05, 0.06, 0.07. Not big, but not smaller than other measurements of advertising effectiveness. In terms of clicking, we're not finding a lot of action. Some consumers are more likely to click when older brands advertise on TV, and people who search a lot click slightly less when brands advertise on TV. That might suggest that some of the branded queries that the TV advertising is associated with are less likely to convert than in the absence of TV advertising. So in terms of the duration of the effect, it's basically in hours, not days, and it lasts longer for people who search frequently. I want to be really clear, the boundaries around this study. There hasn't, in the academic world, as far as I'm aware, there's been no work on this topic. Although I'm sure there's been work here internally, and I've already heard a couple of whispers about that this morning. We're only looking at a particular product category. The behavior in 2006 is probably very different from the behavior today. It's a mature category. I would expect different patterns in a new or evolving category. We're relying on time series identification, and really we would prefer single source panel data. But hopefully we'll spur some additional research on this topic, and hopefully we'll encourage marketers to start planning these two ends of the purchase funnel holistically. Maybe use the same agencies to work on both sides. Maybe adjust the ROI metrics to think about how expenditures in one medium impact outcomes in another. And also for academics, I would argue it's very important to consider the possibility that my brand A's click-through rate may be inherently much lower than brand B's, but that doesn't mean brand A is defenseless. They can take action. They can take a variety of other actions. So I mentioned that I wanted to save about 15 minutes for the more formative study. Before I transition over to that, are there any comments or feedback on this one?
No, I was just going to say that your intuition a few minutes ago is true, that we've done work in this area and do see new searches from TV advertising. I think for some of the reasons that you mentioned, financial services is not a great example. Although we do, even in financial services, we do see an impact. That's all I want to say.
So let me follow that up with a question to you. So are you thinking about separating the category search incidence from the keyword choice, or the choice of a branded keyword?
So I don't. Yeah, so I don't know that we've done that specifically. I have to think about that. But it's a good point. Yes. But and I think, I mean, something you said very early on was definitely something that we found too, which is, different categories have, different kind of draws for people to go online. I mean, we find financial services to be one of the better ones, in part because there's lots of information online for that. And as you said, things like consumer products are relatively poor because it's just the likelihood of finding something interesting online is low, and the ease of getting information by just going and trying it out is high. So
yeah, and a lot of these things are actually delivered online, and I would expect different behavior. If I might even expect different behavior if I looked at a different search engines.
So why did you
base.
use 2006 data? Is that just the only data you could get?
I'm a poor academic. Yes, that's the only data I could get.
But because the financial market turmoil in 2008 and 9, if you redo the study using the data, you think it's probably a lot noisier, or?
It's a good question. I don't have any feel for that.
Quick question. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that you looked at advertisement that call for action on the website or on a phone number. Yeah. Did you see different user behavior in one case or another?
So one of the more surprising results to me from the study is that we didn't find any significant correlations with web emphasis within the ad itself. I suspect the reason for that is that we did not have website traffic data. And so it may be that people just went directly to the website when the website was said during the ad. And I get in trouble when I talk off the top of my head, but I think we were finding that advertising for older brands actually lowers click-through rates for some consumers. And we interpret that as indicating people may be more likely to call on the phone rather than search online or click through on a search. So with that, I'm gonna keep it brief, but we've got what we think is a bit of a provocative result, and I just kind of want to throw it out there because I think it might generate some interesting insights, and I think it's relevant to some of your core business. So the lead author on this paper is Linley Xu. She's a very talented doctoral student at the University of Southern California, and what we're looking at is price advertising in particular. So I'm going to start with 3 facts that I think nobody can dispute. The first is that price is often a signal of quality. So if this was shown in Market Equilibrium by a couple of very famous economists, Milgram and Roberts, and this has been tested in the lab dozens of times by dozens of studies. People infer product quality from the price that they are quoted. So I'm going to take that as fact. Second fact is that marketers are often using advertising to communicate price, saying this might be cheap, or this might be luxury, or this might be high-end. And I don't have a citation other than 3 very famous co-authors, DUH. And finally, the perceived source of an advertisement is important. So I used to teach advertising. I used the leading advertising textbook. This textbook identified 3 factors of an ad as being critical to determining its effect. That is, the perceived source, along with the message and the medium. So when I say source, it's whenever you receive a communication, who you perceive that communication to be from. It could be a celebrity spokesman within the ad, but just as often it's from the organization that paid for the ad. So if we start from those three facts, then we're going to come to a prediction, which is going to be the central theme of this paper, that price advertising by the manufacturer should be less effective than price advertising by dealers or retailers. The reason for that is the manufacturer is responsible for the product quality. And so if I get a price ad from the manufacturer, there's a credibility problem. If your product is so good, why is it so cheap? If I get the same price ad from a retailer or a dealer, there is no such credibility problem. I can attribute the low price to inter-retailer competition or inventory concerns, but I'm not likely to make the same quality attribution to the retailer or the dealer because they didn't make the product themselves. Okay? So that's going to be our prediction. We modified a price advertisement to test this prediction experimentally. And we're looking at the automobile case because in that industry we see a great deal of price advertising by both retailers and manufacturers. So I'm not going to be able to show you the actual stimulus, but I can describe it for you pretty quickly. So we took an ad from Ford. The script of the ad was, since we introduced the Ford family plan, hundreds of thousands of Americans have joined in on the savings. Now we're extending the plan until next September 5th. Get employee pricing on F-Series, America's best-selling truck, blah, blah, blah. We took that ad, we stripped out the audio, we played a Toby Keith song in the background, and I read the same script. That way we could have the same voice and music in the two ads. In the other condition, we made three changes, all of which are consistent with industry practice. First of all, we changed the subjects and the pronouns in the script. So rather than since we introduced the Ford family plan, since Ford introduced the Ford family plan. So this time we're giving the impression that the source is the Texas Ford Dealers Association. Hundreds of thousands of Texans have joined in on the savings. That's the other change we made. We changed the geographic frame of reference from the national market to the Texas market, because that's what local dealers associations typically advertise. And third, we changed the logo in the final 3 seconds of the ad from Ford to the Texas Dealers Association. So in sum, it was a pretty subtle manipulation. We have over 90% of the same words in the two scripts and over 90% of the same video frames in the two ads. We first did a pretest with 150 people. We showed them one of the two ads at random. We asked who paid for it. Was it Ford or was it the Texas Dealers Association? Or do you not know? Or someone else. And we found that people got it right on average. Almost 80% of people got it right in each of the two ads. Next, what we did was we created a survey. So each respondent came to the website. They saw a Ford brand ad showing how tough the truck is, and then they got one of these two price ads at random. Then we asked them a series of questions. We said, indicate your agreement on a 1 to 7 scale with each of the following questions. Ford trucks are good value. Ford trucks are high quality. Ford trucks are tough. That's the branding claim. I would be likely to test drive a Ford truck. I would be likely to purchase a Ford truck. And then we asked what types of trucks they had owned in the past. And we advertised this survey on Facebook to people who had indicated in their profiles that they like pickup trucks or that they like particular models of pickup trucks, and a couple of bulletin boards. So these are the results. This is a sample of about 350 pickup truck enthusiasts or consumers. The dark bars are those who were exposed to the manufacturer price ad. The light bars are those who saw the dealer's price ad. And all of the differences are significant at the 95% confidence level. And it's a 1 to 10 scale. So I'm asking your agreement on a 1 to 10 scale with each of those statements. Ford trucks are high quality, good value, Ford trucks are tough, etc. So all we did was change the perceived source of the price ad from Ford to the Texas Ford Dealers Association. And on a 1 to 10 scale, we see a bump of about 3/4 of a point in the perceived quality of the truck. It's a really big effect, surprisingly big. And we took the ad that existed in the marketplace, and it was in our altered condition, the dealer's price source, that we're doing much better. It's not like we changed it to make it worse. We changed it to make it much better. We also asked people who they thought paid for the ad, whether it was Ford or the Texas Ford Dealers Association or someone else. So if this effect is occurring and people are making this inference, then it should be that people who thought Ford paid for it have the lower quality perceptions. Now that's not random assignment. It's based on reported attribution, but we're seeing almost exactly the same pattern of effects. So the dark bars are people who thought Ford paid for the price ad. The light bars are people who thought the Dealers Association paid for the price ad. Almost the same size of the effects. First four are significant at the 95% level, and the last one significant at the 90% level. That might be my last slide. It is. This is we do more in the paper. We uncover a similar pattern of effects using market data for pickup trucks from 5 years of advertising and sales. But this is something that you have going on in your paid search ads all the time. I see a lot of search ads that say cheap, that say exclusive, that I see a lot of retailers advertising on manufacturer brands. And I thought I would throw this up, and because the first one I knew what was going to come back toward me, but this one I didn't know was going to come back. So I wonder if this is something that you guys have thought about, or if you think it might be interesting for your business.
So I'm just wondering whether you controlled for the second variable that you changed in the spot, where you changed American to Texan.
I went through it really quickly, so let me try to clarify. We randomly assigned them to one of the two price ads. After they answered the 5 questions about quality, we asked them, who do you think paid for the price ad? And so this is based on stated attribution. So if they thought that Ford paid for it, they're going to go into the dark bar. Otherwise, if they thought the Dealers Association paid, they go into the light bar. So not everyone got it right. But what we're showing is that independent of the random assignment of which ad they got, if they thought Ford paid for it, we're seeing the same effect. Now, we think one of the implications of this result is that when the manufacturer does do price advertising, it probably should not play up the fact that it's from the manufacturer. So you don't want to highlight the fact that the manufacturer is paying for it. You might want to, in the TV context, you might want to use a different announcer, maybe a different agency, maybe a different campaign theme. In the search ad context, maybe you don't want to direct consumers to the URL of the manufacturer. Maybe you set up a retailer under a separate brand that's owned by the manufacturer and direct consumers there if the manufacturer is running price ads. Okay, not quite as provocative as I thought.
Last question, yeah. Okay. Do you think it's a real difference between manufacturer and dealers, or just because the consumers perceive a local endorsements of the dealer association? I mean, it's something to do with local community or whatever. That perception is something you can tease out. Yeah.
That's certainly something that we can tease out, and we haven't focused on doing that so far.
Yeah, because it's kind of relevant to the paid advertising, because a lot of times like our ads, people in the creative, they want to add local location and, it's tied to your city, to your town. It seems maybe, will improve the click-through rate. That is just one of the tactics some people might use. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Thanks.